How's it going?
Good. You?
It's all right. It could be better.
Mm.
I have I spent the whole weekend working, um, which I guess with people losing their jobs is like a good thing to have. But between grading, doing my own homework, and studying, I've been beat because Cal State LA ends in 2 weeks. So I have a fat test on Thursday that determines whether or not I graduate. And then the week after, I have finals, which is actually why I'm super glad you guys have AP tests at the same time. And so I have a little bit of breathing room in the space while you guys are taking AP tests to finish the stuff that I need to finish.
Well,
Mr.
good luck
Rob,
with your test.
Yeah. What's up?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I know this week is like a regular class week and next week is AP. And then the
Mhm.
week after is our last week. Is that going to be like a regular class week or are we going to do something else? I just want to know the layout of it.
Yeah. I think I'm coming up to the end of my content. Because honestly, we will be, I mean, I think I've hit on all of the business literacy topics that you guys asked for. So after like today or tomorrow, aside from questions, I won't really have that much. But I still want to meet and talk and have class and stuff. Maybe just, I'm not sure. I really don't know. But this week I was planning on giving the last assignments. And then the next 2 weeks, we're still going to meet and talk, but I'm probably not going to hit you with any more assignments. Why do you ask?
No, I just wanted to know how the layouts are going to be since our other classes are just like APs and stuff.
Yeah, it'll be really chill in those last 2 weeks.
All right.
Mr. Rob,
Yeah. What's up?
when my PC case comes, could I do like a live build?
You can definitely do that. Are you asking if you can do it on Zoom?
Yeah, why not?
No.
Aw,
But you can definitely do it. And like, I don't know, if you give me the link, I'll post it to Classroom, or you could post the link to Classroom yourself.
okay.
Um, okay.
Wait, Mr. Rob, I have a random question,
Yeah.
but it has to do with the computer. So for some reason, my computer keeps like crashing, like my desktop, and then so I did like a virus scan or whatever, and it shows nothing. So I thought it was the RAM. So I changed all the RAM, and then it still keeps crashing.
I bet you, and I mean, it could be any number of things, but I've had a similar issue in very recent history. My computer was doing that, and so was my best friend Steven's rig. And in both cases, the answer ended up being the power supply. It might be just that like your rig is not drawing enough power from your power supply, either because of like a mismatch in rating, or just
But
because like power supplies get crappy over time.
Yeah, but I just
Uh,
changed it. It's like a 850 gold.
does your power supply have an eco switch on it? Sometimes they have a switch on them on the inside, like an eco mode in case they're being used in an office or whatever. And that limits the power, which as soon as, the power gets, as soon as the computer needs more power than it's drawing, it just shuts down. It might
It
have an
does
eco
have
mode
it.
switch. Uh-huh.
It does have it, but not a physical switch. It's inside, like the CMOS.
Yeah.
So but it's off.
Okay. So that actually answers most of my questions of like what I thought it could be. How old's your hard drive?
Like a year old.
That might
And
be
it's the
it, though.
SSD.
Yeah, though usually, I mean, so here's the bummer. SSDs load faster, but they actually can't handle as many read-write cycles as a hard drive. So they perform better, but they live shorter. That's the last thing that you could like try out easily is put Windows on a new solid state drive and transfer all your files over and see if that new solid state drive is more stable.
Just the one that has the operating system, or the one that has my like actual things plus the operating system? Do I have to change both?
Typically, no. Typically, just the one with the operating system will be the one that's giving you problems. If the other drive is giving you problems, you would only know that if like you had a game installed on there and then that game is problematic when you run it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck. It sucks
Thank you.
trying to troubleshoot like that type of problem of like, hey, it could be one of 10 things. Better try all 10 one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome in, everybody. Let's go ahead and start off by updating our stock projects. We have we have 1 week left of updating our stock projects. I'm actually going to end your guys' work on that on Friday, just because I don't want to carry that through AP test time, right? Like through those weeks. That seems silly. So we'll finish taking data on it this week. And then from there forward, anything else I have you do with the Excel sheet will be a manipulation of your already collected data. Let me give you guys some updates about scheduling, the shape of the week, and whatnot. Let me just go ahead and start off first by saying there is no class on Thursday. You know me, I don't like really like to lose class time. I mean, you're all here listening to me lecture from my home office in a Hawaiian shirt, so that's obviously true. And I mean, even when we did the transition, I didn't miss a day, right? Like we were back in it on that Monday. But this Thursday, I have a really important thing to go do. I have my comprehensive exam, and it's a test that determines whether or not I graduate. It is straight up pass, fail, graduate, or you don't. And that test goes from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so while I guess we could theoretically talk in the morning before I had the test, I don't want to do that. I'm going to get up early Thursday and go for like a medium length run and have good food before that day starts so that I'm at top performance for that exam. So yeah, my loss is your gain, I suppose. Though on Thursday, I'll post a quick reminder to Classroom that please do still update your stock projects Thursday. There will still be trading then. Is that okay? Are there any questions there?
Is your test on Zoom?
It seems like it's gonna be, yeah, that they're just gonna like watch me take the test for 6 hours, and especially since the last hour of the test is an interview. It is, they basically go over the test and then ask you questions about what you got wrong live, and you need to be able to defend or correct your wrong answers like on the fly. So for that last part will definitely have to be on Zoom, bare minimum. Though I doubt a professor is going to sit down and watch me for 6 hours. They'll probably just like set it to Zoom, record on their end, and then if it looks like I cheated or whatever, they'll go back and check the video. I doubt somebody will watch me take the whole thing.
Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel ready. I did a lot of work this weekend, which is why I had such a garbage ass weekend, man. I like graded for 3.5 hours, and you know, I don't want to be a crybaby about this, but I'm going to be a crybaby about this for a second. Boy, did I take grading physical tests for freaking granted, man. It's so nice to be able to like have your paper test and like grade it and flip, grade it and flip, grade it and flip. But now that it's all on Google Classroom, and after I grade a page, I have to like click next and wait for that to load. Yo, over 120 pages of grading for my pre-cal class, those load times add up. Sucks. Especially like giving feedback on a paper test. I just write a thing and then I hit go, but like I have to draw a box and then type in some feedback and then hit enter, and then I'm also keeping track of the grades on a physical piece of paper so that I can enter them. I hate grading tests from home. It is driving me crazy. But nonetheless, even after all that, I then spent the rest of the weekend doing homework for some classes and also studying. So like my brain was already melted, and then I tried to learn stuff. So I spent time yesterday, and this is true of y'all if y'all ever have to study for something big. I did an inventory of what I know, and I was like, okay, this is what I have to study. I have 3 afternoons left to do significant studying on each afternoon. So I took what I needed to look at, I broke it up into 3 chunks, and I have a plan. Whether or not the plan works, you know, at least it's better than nothing. So yeah, number 1, update your stocks, and then I want to see how you guys are doing out there. And then item number 2 use the Credit Karma debt calculator, which I posted to Classroom. And that thing's just a great resource. It's a great thing to use if you want to know, like, hey, based on what I'm doing in terms of my debt, how much money is left on the clock. Just use it to figure out what the total repayment would be on a 30-year loan with an APR of 4.2%, where the amount of money that you're borrowing is $60,000. And I want you to write a ratio of how much money you're borrowing to how much money you're paying back. That ratio is really important to keep in mind because it helps us better think about the value of a scholarship. Today we're running up to the end of our, like very close to the end of our topics, because you guys know we made a deal, right? Like if we do the calculus stuff and we hit it hard and we get it all out of the way, then we get to do this financial literacy stuff, which when I was in high school was its own class that most of the seniors would take. It wouldn't be like a whole year, it would be like a quarter. I think we're getting close to the end unless you guys have some other topics that I can talk about. I'll either have to shift gears or maybe we'll circle back around and give some of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning a deeper look. But has this stuff answered most of your questions? Is there like anything else that you want me to talk about before the class is over?
Not really.
Yeah, I mean,
We got like most of it.
Yeah, the only other thing I could think of is like auto loans, but to be honest with you, auto loans are basically identical to the rest of this logic. Like when you compare renting a house to mortgaging a house, it's really similar to the notion of having a lease on a car versus purchasing a car with like an auto loan. I guess there are some important differences, like the fact that house values tend to do what over time? At least in Southern California, housing values tend to go up. So for the most part, this is not a guarantee, but for the most part, if you buy a house, when you end up selling it, you end up selling it for more, as long as you're not in a city like Detroit or whatever. But what tends to happen to car values over time, unless you get really
it's like
lucky?
The opposite. Like
Yeah.
It deteriorates. Yeah.
Yeah, it depreciates. And in a lot of cars, like for a regular old like end user car, the moment you drive it off the lot, you lose half, and then it only gets worse from there. It's like really rare that you happen to purchase a car that then goes on to be a collector's item, which causes it to appreciate. But past that difference, the logic is the same. So I guess talking about auto loans would be our last thing. And then that'll be about it for financial literacy. Y'all should be like literate enough to make decisions for yourself. Though common disclaimer, this is not financial advice. This is not the sale or offer of a security. I'm not telling you guys exactly how to invest your money, just making sure that you have the correct vocab and considerations. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Any movements on your guys' stocks? Any interesting ones that you guys want to look at?
American Airlines is down to $9 a stock.
Oh yeah, that is true. And that's after a long period of losses, right? So why is that?
No one's flying.
Yeah, a big part of it is no one is flying. And also, it's not just that, because like a bunch of companies that are like failing or having issues right now will occasionally see an increase in stock values if they are then bailed out, right? So if the government is like, hey, we can't let you guys go out of business, we'll inject all this cash into you so that you don't die. American Airlines is kind of getting hated on because of their financial behavior in the lead up to the COVID-19 crisis. They did a bunch of stock buybacks where they purchased stock back from their holders using cash on hand, which basically gives them like, it gives the executives more control of the company in exchange for them burning up a bunch of cash. It's typically an irresponsible thing to do unless you are also setting aside cash for savings or also reinvesting. So because of all those stock buybacks that they had right before the crisis, the government is being really fishy about bailing them out. Of like, if you just burned up your whole savings account, why am I gonna help you? You just had a savings account that you shouldn't have burned up, you know? Any other interesting ones out there that you guys are holding? Any movements up or down? Anybody out there holding Tesla?
Yeah, that dropped and it's back up today.
It took a fat drop a few days ago. Did you or are you guys plugged into the news about this stuff enough to have seen that? Let me pull the graph up here.
Is it the one where he said fascism, or is it the one where he tweeted the Star Spangled Banner and then said, "Let's have freedom"?
Oh, it was literally one of those and then the others. So the day after, and I mean, I don't think you should idolize Elon Musk. That's not what I'm saying. Again, all of this is a learning opportunity. The reason why I bring this up is just to warn you guys that the behavior of an individual, and in this case, the CEO of Tesla, drives a stock price. It is straight up rumors and gossip, and in this case, tweets. So he had the moment at their Q1 investment meeting where he said that the country being shut down is fascism, right? And then the stock started to drop. The next day, the dude wakes up and he tweets out that he thinks Tesla's stock value is too high and that he's selling off all of his stuff. And then after he sends out that tweet, stock drops to 700. So there's a bunch of people right now who are looking at Tesla, and it could either be that this is the beginning of the end for the electric car giant, in which case from here it's free fall. There are other people who saw the stock drop down to $700 a share at the start of the weekend and then ordered a bunch over the weekend. They're like, oh, Tesla's cheap right now. Maybe this will come back. And so a bunch of people purchased over the weekend while market was closed. And then it opens Monday, and then the stock starts climbing because of how many people are purchasing. This is weird stuff, man. The fact that you can like delete billions of dollars of value from your company just by sending out one tweet.
Mr. Rob, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You know how like a bunch of people can buy like stocks like after hours, right?
Right. So yeah. What's the question about after hour trading?
Is there ever like a limit to how many stocks there can be for a company or no?
There is, yeah, and companies more or less control how many shares of their own company are available at any given time. That's why companies go through stock buybacks, because they want to actively decrease the number of shares that are available on the market. Or companies can even do a thing called a stock split, where they automatically double the amount of stocks for a company that are available, but each one loses half the value. It's a way that they can increase the number of stocks without changing the value of their company.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Yeah. But yeah, for the most part, that stuff is important just because when it comes to the running of a company, you as a shareholder, you get to vote even with one share. It's just that with there being usually for a major public corporation, there are millions of shares available. You as a voter doesn't matter unless you yourself have a lot of shares, right? A lot of stake in the company. Like your importance begins maybe at like 10,000 shares for a company.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. And I mean, you know, if you want to take a company over, acquire 51% of the shares, and now suddenly you're in charge of the company. Yeah, I mean, not exactly, but it would give you the power or the ability to threaten that, like.
That's honestly crazy.
Yeah. I mean, no, if you had 51% on hand, it would give you the ability to threaten that you are going to put up a proposition to make yourself the CEO, and then you could, as a single person, overwhelm the vote of everybody else in the company, which is like what a hostile takeover would be. Though usually a hostile takeover doesn't require getting 51% of the vote. You just need a majority. So a lot of people who have control of a company, it's with about 35, 40%. And then the rest of the percent that you need, you get by forming alliances. You find like other major shareholders, like you find a few people who each have 1% of the company, and you get them to back you in your takeover of the company. And then that would be enough to gain control of a corporation.
Gotcha.
That's why a bunch of people, when their company goes public or whatever, they're like, hey, we're going to have an IPO, but us as like me personally, I'm going to retain 60% of all of the stocks so that nobody can outvote me. But then when those companies become strapped for cash and they're like, uh-oh, we need cash in order to pay our employees, they'll sell off some of their own stock, which is how you get companies in a position where they could be taken over externally. It's wild stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, if there's no other talk about how your guys' theoretical stock portfolios are going, let's go ahead and talk about item number 2. What is the total repayment on a 30-year loan with an APR of 4.2%, where your principal is about $60,000, right? And so in order to analyze that, we're going to go ahead and go to the Credit Karma debt calculator. Not that like I mean to be shilling their product. Like, it's just a website. There's a bunch of different ones. I just like the way that this one is laid out. The other good website is NerdWallet. NerdWallet is a great resource for like these more complicated, like, oh my God, how much is this going to actually cost me in the long run type question. But nonetheless. So here I plug in my values. We borrow $60,000. And what kind of debt were we talking about on Friday, y'all? Kids, what kind of debt were we talking about on Friday before we headed out to the weekend and forgot about paying back, companies? Why do we fill out
Was it
FAFSA?
mortgages? Oh no, student loans.
Yeah, last week on Friday we were talking about student loans, and so that's kind of what this question is meant to be about. The reason why the APR is 4.2% is that right now that's a pretty common student loan rate that people are repaying. I think the rates that are going out at the exact moment are a little bit lower than that, so hopefully you guys will be paying less interest than I am. But 4% is about the ballpark. If it's subsidized, which means the government is going to pay for a big chunk of that interest, the interest rate is usually about half. Subsidized loans are going for like 1.8 to 2%. But if it's an unsubsidized loan held by some sort of private collector, yeah, probably about 4%. Nonetheless, we put those terms in here, and notice the way that I put in 30 years is by putting this in, because the months are paid back yearly, so it's 30 times 12, and then we hit calculate. And so down here, by the time you pay back all of this debt, right, you will pay back $45,776 in interest. So what's the grand total that we end up paying back? How much money do we pay back total here?
5,576. Just 115. My bad. Just add both of them up.
Yeah, exactly. So $776, right? So you borrow $60,000 to go to school, and over the course of your lifetime working to pay it back, assuming that you are paying it back according to their typical pay scheme, which is to say you're paying off a fraction of the principal as well as all of your interest every month, it's going to cost $115,776 to repay. Now, let's go ahead and express this as a ratio. How would I get my ratio R?
Isn't it 0.042?
Ooh, I like that, but we actually want the ratio the other way. We want repayment total divided by P. So it's actually 1 divided by that number. And the reason why we're doing this is that I really like this as a metric for the sake of thinking about the financing of college, the financing of debt in total. A lot of the times the APR is a small number to try and hide what this really costs you. What is this ratio?
Isn't it the interest rate?
No, what is this ratio? I'm just asking you to divide two numbers.
It's 1.92.
1.9296.
Yeah, so let's go with 1.93. So here's why I like this as a metric. This is actually really important for informing how you think about money that you are spending, which is inherently borrowed, right? So like I said, this is like pretty common terms for a student loan. If it's a subsidized loan, it's a little bit less than this. But here's how you should think about this. For every single dollar that you borrow while you're in college, the adult version of yourself is going to be paying back really, 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 really close to double that amount. So this cuts two ways, right? Number one, let's say that you are in college and you live in the dining commons, and so you swipe your food onto your card and you have to eat. There's really no avoiding that, right? And you go to the dining hall and you get a $9 meal. How much does that $9 meal actually cost when you pay for it? How much does that $9 meal cost?
$10. Like, in what rate?
If you borrow, okay, so here's what these numbers mean. That repayment calculator is giving us the total amount of money that it's going to take to pay back this debt. This is to say you borrow $60,000 to attend college. By the time you pay it back, right, at minimum payments for 30 years, it's going to cost you a total repayment of $115,776. So the ratio of how much you pay back versus how much you borrow is 1.93 to 1. This is to say that if you borrow $9 to eat a meal in college, by the time you repay it back, this number multiplied by 1.93 means that the adult version of yourself is actually paying back $17.37 in repayment in order for the food that you ate in college to be repaid.
Oh, okay.
Every single dollar that you spend in order to pay for college, if it's going on a loan, if it's going on for debt, it is going to lead to a repayment of close to double that. However, this cuts both ways because a lot of the times people don't want to apply for scholarships, even though it's like easy to do so now. Like we did it a while ago as homework, right? People don't want to pay for scholarships, but when it comes to that scholarship money, you should think of it the same way. So if you're looking at a scholarship and you're like, hey, this scholarship is $4,500, and it's available to you now, if this $4,500 stops you from having to take out loans, then the amount of money that it will save you in the long run is the exact same multiplier. So they give you that $4,500 now, which stops you from having to take out $4,500 in loans. And so even though it's not that much money seeming here, right, $4,500 scholarship, it is actually saving you $8,685 of repayment. Whenever you get a scholarship or a grant or whatever, when you get that money in, double it in your head because that's the amount of money that it's saving the adult version of yourself from having to repay. Is this okay? Are there any questions about the finances or mechanics of student loans based on what we talked about last week? So it's based on your parents' finances. They will most likely have to co-sign it. Having a co-signer on any sort of debt or lease means that if you fail to repay it, it then becomes the problem of the co-signer and it becomes their debt to deal with. And once you graduate, you have to start paying it back. If you can't make a payment on a student loan because you cannot declare bankruptcy on them, they have special rules that allow you to do income-based repayment or deferment. So if you lose your job, you can be relieved from having to pay them off for a few months until you find new work. Or if you work a job that doesn't make enough money to pay them back quickly, you can get income-based repayment, which makes it so that you only have to pay a specific fraction of your monthly income. Is that okay? Okay, so here is what we're going to talk about today. Most financial aid is income-based.
Yeah,
sorry,
if I remember correctly, didn't you say that? Sorry for cutting you off, but
No, it's
didn't
cool.
you see that thing? like the middle class usually gets like the worst deals on it. Poor gets obviously the highest, and rich is like whatever deals on it.
So my talk about that, and you know, it would be like you'd have to draw a graph of income, which I don't really want to do, because people will place themselves on it and feel a certain way. But below a certain level of income, you get really good financial offers. So this isn't like universal what I'm about to say, because Harvard has the largest endowment of any college in the world. And that's because they are the oldest college in North America. And because their investments are from the 1600s and they've been allowed to appreciate this whole time, they have such an exorbitant amount of money that it's like, when you look at the numbers, you're like, no way are the numbers this high, but they actually are. So Harvard's deal is that if your family makes less than $100,000 annually, which, you know, this is California, that's an okay amount of money, but for like the middle of the country, like if you ask yourself, hey, how many people in this town make less than $100,000? It'll turn out that it's everybody in the town other than like the town doctor and maybe the mayor, right? So it's really common that you have entire counties where nobody makes six figures, right? But if you get into Harvard and your family makes less than six figures, you get a full ride. Everybody who attends Harvard below that income bracket will just, they're covered, right? So the contradiction that is created by us means testing assistance for education, just kind of the thing that comes out of it is the fact that if you are rich, right, if you are a multimillionaire, then your kid goes to college, who cares? You write a check for tuition and it's not a problem, right? You're just like, oh, $60,000, write a check, you have your accountant give it to the college or whatever, you wouldn't even handle it personally, and it's trivial. So rich people have no issues paying for college. And then on the other hand, if you're poor, getting into college is harder just because, like, you know, people who are poor tend to face different academic difficulties that people who are well off don't face. I mean, here's an easy one. Poor people can't hire tutors or whatever. If those people can get into colleges, once they get in, for the most part, they're taken care of because of all of these scholarships that are income-based or whatever. You're like, oh, this grant is only for people whose families make less than $50,000 a year or whatever. But if you happen to fall in that middle range where your parents make a little bit too much money to qualify for large grants and scholarships, but they don't make enough money to pay for college out of their checking accounts, then you fall into that gnarly middle area where you end up going into debt to pay for college, which is not always a financially preferable situation. That's why I'm telling you guys about these considerations, so that it's not just like debt that you find yourself with in 4 years and you're like, oh, how did I end up here? So that you know what you're getting into, and so that there's a return on investment proposition to be made, that you do want to try and save as much money on going to college as possible. And then when you get out, you want to use it to leverage and make as much money as possible. But there's an income outcome calculation to be made here. It's not just like, oh, no matter what, this is a good idea. Is that okay? Like in a perfect world, I think you should study whatever you want to study. But in reality, if you have to go into a certain amount of debt to do it, and you sit down and you calculate what those monthly payments are going to be for the next 30 years of your life, decrease whatever planned income you were going to have by that amount for 30 years of your life, and see if that's fine. You know, if it's like, hey, this is going to cost me $1,000 a month for the next 30 years, really think about it. Think about it. Nonetheless, most financial aid is G.P.A. based. That is to say that either you will get offered more money if you have a higher G.P.A., or you will find that some scholarships are straight hard and fast cutoffs, that if you go below a certain line, you lose your financial aid. And this happened to me 1 quarter at UCLA, which is why I'm going to warn all of y'all about it very clearly. I had a scholarship that paid for a big chunk of school, but I had 1 quarter where I dipped below 3.5. As soon as that happened and my GPA was processed, I lost that money, and I had to fill out basically emergency paperwork to pay for my next quarter of school, where I had lost X amount of dollars based on my decrease in GPA. And so I then had to take out X amount of dollars in loans at the worst rate possible in order to finish out the rest of my junior year of school. Now I like fixed my GPA and I got that money back for my senior year, but I think it cost me like $8,000, which means it'll cost me in the long run $16,000 of repayment just because one quarter I dipped down to a 3.3. And so the reason why I bring this up is not just to tell you about my transcripts, because boy, is that a boring story. I just want you guys to know that there are bureaucratic ways to protect your GPA. And not just because, and here's why I tell you this, man. So one, some of you guys are headed towards competitive or hyper-competitive fields like med school or law school or business school, where your GPA is the key to getting in or not getting in. And so you want to protect your GPA as best you can. And of course, this means study and, you know, do well on your tests, all of that good stuff, the part of school where you're going to get a GPA for the right reasons. You should understand that there are also ways to get a high GPA for not, I don't want to say it's the wrong reasons, because that makes it sound like this is cheating. However, there are tools at your disposal that you can use to affect your GPA, and I think it's important to know about these. As soon as you get to your school, your four-year university or your community college, talk to a counselor and ask them questions about the following vocab. So talk to a counselor, because the rules that I'm about to throw down are what they were at UCLA while I was there. And since then, they've changed. Exactly what these rules are will be at your college, will be different, and they will change over the time. The best way to get the fine details on the rules for these mechanisms is to talk to your counselor and ask some questions about the following phrases. How many classes can you retake? That's definitely a question you want to know. How many times can you fail and retake a class? What is the retake grade cutoff? What is the rule about taking a course pass, no pass? What are the rules about withdrawing from a class? What about taking an incomplete on a class? Because exactly what the rules are about these four things are rules that you can manipulate in order to make sure that your overall GPA coming out on the other side is good. So let's just go ahead and talk about these, and then I'll answer your guys' questions the best I can based on my experience talking to counselors and playing these games. So number one, how many classes are you allowed to retake? Typically, there's a cap on retaking classes. And then past that cap, grades get averaged. So let's say that, you know, you're at your major four-year university and for whatever reason stuff isn't clicking or you're having a hard time personally and you end up failing 2 classes. So you get an F and you get another F, but in one of your classes you stick in there and you get a B, right? And what these classes are is irrelevant, so let's not worry about it. And then the next quarter, so here's Q1, right? You get set up with a counselor, they help you, all that good stuff. And then the next quarter, quarter 2, you retake these classes. And I guess for this to make sense, we will have to name them. So let's just say that it's Math 1, History 1, but the thing that you took and liked was Computers 2. Over here in quarter 2, you can retake them, and you retake Math 1, and you retake History 1. And then you take a new class, you take Armenian language 4 or whatever, and then this time you get an A, you get a B+, and then you get an A. So on your transcript, what does this look like when this rings up, you think? What is the final appearance of this?
For quarter 1 or for quarter 2 or for both?
Your transcript. So your transcript is broken up into quarters, but if you retake a class, there's some revisionism that goes on here.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't the A's cancel out the F's if you retake it?
And it all depends on whether or not you're above or below the retake cap, which is why it's important to know how many times you can do that. So if you are below the cap, yeah, it just deletes these because colleges kind of recognize that, you know, freshmen are going to have a hard time taking classes that are actually being graded. And so below a certain number of courses, and when I was at UCLA, the cap was 4 classes, then it would be fine. And in terms of what this would look like on your transcript, it just deletes the old F and you just get the new grade only. Like they will literally delete what happened before from your transcript so that anybody reviewing it doesn't see the old F. However, if you fail a bunch of classes and you go over the cap, right, from here forward, so post cap, then they'll do an averaging of your GPA. So for that class on your transcript, they'll show the F, they'll show the A for Math 1, and then the GPA will ring up as a 2.0 because if it's an average of a 4.0 and a 0.0. Post cap, this GPA averaging occurs, which can be really, really damaging to your GPA, especially considering that every failed class after that will also be rung up in this way that is averaged. So talk to your counselor, ask them exactly how many classes are allowed to be retaken and exactly what the deal is. Yeah, item number 2.
Mr. Rob,
Yes.
before that, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Is the only scenario where you can retake a class if you fail it?
That's a good question, and that's actually what I'm going to talk about next. So you can retake any class you want theoretically, but in terms of how it's treated in your GPA, there is a grade cutoff,
Okay, gotcha.
which sucks. And this is a thing that a lot of people don't know. I knew a pre-med who got into a dumb situation because of this. The problem for this pre-med was that she got a C- in a class. So let's say that you got a C- in Bio 1 or whatever, and then she asked to retake it. So she just enrolled in the exact same class again the next quarter. So here's quarter 1, here's quarter 2. And then the next time she retook it, she got an A in Bio 1. And so on her transcript, when it rung up as a C- averaged with an A for a grand total in Bio 1 of 2.9. And she was like, why did I work super hard to get an A if it was only going to ring up as a 2.9? Turns out, a thing that she didn't know, a thing that she should have asked her counselor about before she decided to just retake a class on her own, was that if you don't fail the class, this remains here. Which leads to the ridiculous strategy that I'm about to outline, which I would not recommend, but I do know a person who has once done this intentionally, and it blew my mind.
Purposely failed the class if you're doing bad in it, right? If you know you're gonna
Purposely
get an A.
failed the class, absolutely, yeah. And I
was thinking about that.
I would not personally kamikaze your grade in a class unless you talk to a counselor first and you walk them through the strategy that I'm about to describe. You ask your counselor if this makes sense before you do this, because this is a wacky strategy. So you can't retake on a C-. You're not supposed to, and if you do, you end up with an average GPA. But if you're below your retake cap, if you're like, hey, I only need 4 classes left to graduate, the retake cap is also 4. So no matter what, I'm not going to run out of retakes, right? As this quarter was going on, let's say that you were watching your grade and there's a midterm 1 and a midterm 2 and a final, right? And you're like, okay, midterm 1, I got a C. That's not good. Midterm 2, I got a C-. That's not good. And you do the math using the grade on the syllabus, and you're like, okay, with a C here and a C- here, even if I get an A on the final, the highest grade I can get out in the end is still just going to be a C+, right? A thing that can be done is you can fail the class on purpose. Like, you just don't show up, you just don't take the final. And usually for any class, even if the final is only like 30 or 40%, not taking the final is usually an automatic 0. So you automatically get the F here, which means you automatically get the F here, but it means that when you retake it, instead of retaking it for a 2.9, you would have retaken it for a 4.0 because the A will simply override the F. Again, talk to your counselor and see what the exact fine details, what the rules are on this. But I knew a person who took this as a superior outcome to getting the averaged out 2.9. Up next, taking a class pass, no pass. Typically, you cannot take a class pass, no pass if it's related to your major. So as somebody who majors in physics, if the name of the class was physics, then followed by a number, that is a class that you must take for a grade. But I'll tell you what, I took French art history pass, no pass, and I was glad to, because after I looked at the grades that I got back on the essays, I probably would have gotten a C on there. So pass, no pass, right? Taking a class pass, no pass makes it so that you get the same credit for the class. It fulfills the same requirements, get the same credit, but there is no impact on your GPA. Typically, you have to declare whether or not you're taking a class pass, no pass before you are receiving a grade for it. Typically, you have to decide whether or not you're taking something pass, no pass week 1 or 2, just so that you can't do the thing where you're like, uh-oh, I got a C on the first midterm, I'm going to switch to pass, no pass. Yeah, you can't do that. But if you think a class is going to be hard, or if you have multiple hard classes in the same quarter and you're like, I have these 3 other hard classes, I'm just not going to be able to focus on this 4th thing, but I need to take it anyway, then you can take it pass, no pass. Here's the risk / reward or whatever. If you take a class pass, no pass, right, you benefit if you get an A, B, C, basically if you get a B or a C. So it's going to take all of these A's, B's, and C's, and it's going to convert any one of these percentages to a pass. And then if it was a D or an F, then you fail like you would have failed anyway, right? Oh, I'm sorry, that's bad. I mean, no pass, right? It means that you wouldn't have passed. Pass, no pass. However, within this, we also have the second analysis that we need to look at here, where if you took it pass, no pass, and you would have gotten a B or a C, this was probably smart, because it'll stop either one of these from pulling your grade point average down. If you're at a 3 point something, a 3.0 or a 2.0 will pull your grade average down. However, the saddest thing is if you take a class pass, no pass, but you would have gotten an A. Tell me why that's not smart. Why is it not smart to take a class pass, no pass if you would have gotten an A?
It's a GPA boost.
Yeah, if you would have gotten that A, it would have averaged in a 4.0 and it would have pulled your GPA up. So if you take a class pass, no pass, and you score 90% in the class, you know, rest in peace. You should have just declared it for regular grading at the start. But yeah, no, straight up, I took French art history, pass, no pass. I definitely would have gotten a C considering I got a C on both of the essays for that class. But man, in the end, I got a P. It was great, graduated. And then finally, warnings about the phrases withdrawal, incomplete, all that stuff. Over the length of a quarter or a semester, and again, because they're different lengths, the rules are different school by school, depending on whatever their system is. So, you know, talk to your counselor. I'm giving you questions to ask your counselor, because protecting your GPA will also protect your pocketbook, right? Doing good in school gets you more money to pay for school for free. This is also part of our financial literacy. But typically over the length of a quarter is a 10-week chunk over which you take classes. So we have weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then finals week, right? You should know that within this 10-week structure, there are deadlines and cutoffs that you must learn. And like I said, the deadlines and cutoffs I'm about to give you are not universal. These are simply what they were at UCLA, what I remember from undergrad. So after week 2, basically that weekend is your last chance to do a clean drop and add. After week 3, you will need permissions to do this. Either one, to either drop or to add. 3 weeks of class is a lot to miss. The weekend of week 4 is when we get to withdrawal range. And then after week 6 is where we get to incomplete land. Right. And so as you go along throughout your quarter, you're going to have various assessments. And most classes either just have 2. Either you have a midterm at week 5 and then a final during finals week, or the most common structure is usually a 2 midterm structure where you have a midterm during week 4, you have a midterm during week 7, and then you have your final during finals week. And so this is the one checkpoint where you will get a grade. This is the second checkpoint where you will get a grade, and then this determines your final grade, right? So typically after week 2, this is your last chance to do a clean drop or a clean add. So that means you can drop a class with no repercussions, no notes on your transcript, nothing. You can also add extra classes. So if you go through your first week of lecture, maybe even your second week of lecture, and you're like, I don't really like this professor, I don't like this topic, I don't like the way that this makes my schedule, if you have like one 8 a.m. class and a bunch of afternoon courses. So if you want to change that stuff up, you basically have 2 weeks to situate your schedule to do that. After that, there will be another checkpoint where doing this will require a permission, typically called a PTE, like a permission to enroll number. So if you're trying to add to a class late, like this during that 3rd week, you'll need a signature from a professor, which usually takes the form of like a special number that they have that you're supposed to enter on the school website. You also may need permission to drop a class. So if you're like, hey, I know I was here for the first 2 weeks, but something changed and I can't do this, you might have to talk to a professor in order to get their permission to drop. Past that, dropping a class around week 4, we'll get a note on your transcript, which is a withdrawal, a W. It's a note on your transcript that says that you dropped a class late, and usually what people assume about this is the fact that you got back your grade for midterm 1 and you didn't like it. You're like, uh-oh, I'm starting off with a D in this midterm. I should probably bail on this and try again later. And so you'll get a W, which is withdrawn from the class. It's a note that shows up on your transcript, but typically has no effect on GPA. No GPA change. The only thing is that if you ever have to talk to somebody about your transcript, like if you use it to apply to additional school, you may then have to be able to justify why it is that you ended up with that W. You know, just make something up, tell a good story.
If I remember correctly, isn't that what you did too?
I've had to withdraw from classes, yeah, because of like health stuff. I also withdrew from one class strategically because it was my senior year and I still had 1 quarter. So I withdrew from one class during my winter quarter and then retook it spring because the first midterm was rotten.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then finally, an incomplete is happens if you drop a class really, really late. And usually this is only done if you have like a medical reason to do so or some external reason you can justify. Usually they won't drop I's for no reason. So like sometimes, man, I've seen people just like disappear from a class entirely because it's college. They just like walk away. If you do that, you will get an F, and that F will probably stick until you redo it. But if you have to leave school early for a term or whatever, a lot of the time they'll grant an I on your transcript, which means that you didn't finish it, right? And you should be aware that incompletes have special rules on them. Usually what this means is that you have no GPA change for a school year. And then after that 1 school year is over, it will then revert to an F. So if you have to leave and you're like, hey, there was a loss in the family, I need to travel to go deal with it or whatever, you can ask the counseling department to give you incompletes for the quarter. But the thing about an incomplete is that you are basically promising to come back and finish that class If you don't do it within a certain amount of time, it usually automatically becomes an F. The one thing about incompletes that's kind of cool though, is that usually they don't ask you to start all over. So if you have to take an incomplete on a class for a personal reason or whatever, and let's say you take the incomplete here at week 8, right? If you talk to that professor, talk to your counselor also, you can usually set up a deal where you're like, okay, I took midterm 1, I took midterm 2, I like those grades, I'm gonna keep those. You take your incomplete, you deal with whatever family stuff you have to go deal with, or whatever stuff is going in your life that caused you to leave school. And then when you come back, they'll usually only require that you do this stuff on your own and then take the final. And then once you take the final, they will then enter a grade for you retroactively for whatever you had missed. So usually they're not going to make you start the class all over. They're not going to make you do everything. You get to put the class on pause and then come back and finish it when you're able. Is that okay for these terms and terminologies?
Yeah, is there ever like a validity check of like what you're saying? Like, for example, like you do like this incomplete thing, right? Like saying that like a family member has passed, but in reality, no one has passed and you're just doing really bad. And, like you need a little time to focus or whatever. Like, can someone do that?
You could, I suppose. It's not, I mean, they're not going to ask you for like a death certificate in most circumstances. That would be like outside the boundaries of a counseling department and like what they do or whatever. What I would assert is that if you are in such a dire situation, week 7 or 8 of a quarter, that you need to take incomplete on several classes to finish them later, you probably are having larger problems that won't be resolved by this. And I would imagine that somebody who has to do that will probably not recover based on this one move.
Yeah.
Like if you're in such a bad situation class-wise, you probably need to do some bigger changes other than just trying to buy yourself a few extra weeks to study for a thing. But I don't think they would ask for outside verification or anything. But you know, if you get caught in a lie, you get caught in a lie if it's obvious.
And you get kicked out of the school if you lie about something like that or no?
That's a really good question. I'm going to go ahead and assume, without doing any prior research, so of course take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, that academic conduct rule books, academic dishonesty stuff, colleges have had a lot of time, in a lot of cases more than 100 years, to refine that language to make it all-encompassing. Lying to avoid an assessment would fall under the same sort of academic dishonesty rules at a college that cheating on a test would, and a single act of academic dishonesty over that line would be an immediate expulsion. So if you lied to dodge a test and were caught in a lie to dodge a test, that would be grounds for expulsion, probably.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
At least according to the rule book. Colleges are proud about being real draconian about that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is it for today. There are bureaucratic ways that you can affect your GPA, that you can protect your GPA, and I only tell you this because protecting your GPA may protect your scholarship and grant interests, and so protecting your GPA also protects your bank account. Play the game wisely. On top of your student ID and your .edu email getting you a bunch of discounts different places, being a good student can save you money. Not only on your car insurance, which, by the way, if you get straight A's, send that stuff to your car insurance company. They'll give you a discount. However, there are bureaucratic ways that you can work with your local counseling department in order to protect your GPA. Know what the rules are at your campus for how many classes you can fail and retake. Know what the cutoffs are for dropping a class clean, taking a withdrawal on a class, or taking an incomplete on a class, and also know the strategy about taking difficult classes that are not part of your major as pass, no pass. So if you think there's a chance that you're going to get a B or a C, don't do it. Just get a pass, right? Just get out of there clean. You all have a nice day. Ask your counselors these questions at your community colleges or for your universities, and I will see you all tomorrow. Be sure to work on that mortgage homework.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rob. Have a good one.
Yep, you too.